My heart is to see God's people full of passion and the fire of God, hungry for His presence on a daily basis, full of His power and having a positive impact on the world and those around them, living a life of freedom and victory. This is Running with Fire.
Because hunger defines us in so many ways, and it will decide where we put our time, our finances, our energy, what our lifestyle is going to be like. And so one of the most important questions you can ever ask in life is, what am I really hungry for? We're going to run faster when we're hungry for something. So we just got to make sure that thing we're hungry for is the right thing. At stake is your walk with God. At stake is an open heaven over your life, which comes with hunger for God. What's at stake is being blessed by God, which is happiness and contentment regardless of your circumstances. There's a lot at stake. I want to talk to you about something today that it's probably one of the most powerful forces that operate in our lives. And I don't think we're aware of it a lot of the time. It actually drives us. In fact, it determines a lot of what your future is going to look like. I mean, I'm sure if you're anything like me, you'd love to know, gosh, what's my life going to be looking like 5 years, 10 years time, or even 18 months time? Where am I actually heading? I'm going to look at one word in particular that is going to define a lot of what our future is going to look like. And the word that I have for you today is hunger. Hunger is just such a powerful thing. In fact, it will even determine the people you hang out with and the people who want to hang out with you, because hunger defines us in so many ways, and it will decide where we put our time, our finances, our energy, what our lifestyle is going to be like. And so one of the most important questions you can ever ask in life is, what am I really hungry for? What drives me? Where is my life heading? Here's my question I want to ask you right now. What are the 3 things, if you can name them, that you're hungriest for? It's worth sitting back, reflecting for a few minutes and trying to answer that question honestly. I can help you answer that. And the way I do that is have a look at your calendar and have a look at your bank statement. Your calendar is going to tell you where you spend your time and your energy. Your bank statement is going to tell you where you spend your money. Those 2 things will define to a large measure what drives you, what you are really hungry for. If you want to think about hunger, think of a sports person. They are so hungry to do well. They are so hungry to win in their sport. The calendar, practice, 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 practice. Their bank statement, expense after expense, equipment, better shoes, better whatever. They would clearly define what they are hungry for. In fact, almost no sacrifice is too great. So I think a sports person is a great example of the power of hunger and how it can define how you actually live your life and where you spend your money. So I went online, I thought I'd look up some quotes on hunger. So this is just hunger generally in life. So listen to a few of these ones. I thought they were quite interesting. If you want to do anything worthwhile in your life, you've got to be hungry. Les Brown. Salman Khan said, a lion runs the fastest when he is hungry. It's an interesting little thought, isn't it? We're going to run faster when we're hungry for something. So we just got to make sure that thing we're hungry for is the right thing. And hey, it's going to make you run faster. So what do you think would possibly be the greatest hunger you could have in your life? What would be the most powerful thing, the most important thing? What should be at the top of your list and mine in terms of what we should be hungry for in our lives? The answer is found in Matthew 5, verse 6, which says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." Filled with God, filled with His blessing, filled with His favor, when we hunger and thirst after God. We know people like King David was just so hungry for the Lord. The Apostle Paul, that I might know Him. These people that had hunger, they really did excel in life and in their walk with God. And I think when we get this right, it's going to release the maximum possible blessing in our lives. We're going to see God do things that I think will surprise us. As Church Unlimited, we often talk about a prophetic word we've had, leave me astounded. When we hunger and thirst after God, He is going to leave you and me astounded. I've experienced that so many times in my life, and the more hungry I am, I find the more often God does leave me astounded. There was a red-haired boy in a Sunday school many years ago, and he would virtually almost attack the teachers and the superintendent and kick them. He was uncontrollable, throw things all over the place, and they just wanted to, expel him from Sunday school. I don't know if you can do that, but anyway, the thought was that they'd give him one more chance. At that same time, there were some special meetings on, and this red-haired, uncontrollable, violent boy got saved. He was so saved that he would spend time at the pastor's house, and the pastor almost couldn't get rid of him. He would stay up all hours, late into the night, crying out to God to change him and to use him. He just got so hungry for God. Well, the amazing thing is that God met him at his hunger. They say that he became one of the most gentle young people that you could ever know. God transformed him, and then he went and spent 20 years, would you believe, as a missionary in China. That's hunger. Uncontrollable. Expel the boy. Waste of time. Going nowhere. Gets saved. Gets hungry. And ends up wonderfully used by God as a missionary in China. That's the power of our gospel. That's the power of Jesus to change and transform lives. If your life needs changing, if you need a breakthrough, if you've got kids or family that are out of control, hey, why don't you ask God to give you a real hunger to see a breakthrough, to see a transformation? Because as I said before, I believe a hunger for God opens the heavens over our lives and permits God to do the seeming impossible. Remember the red-haired boy, uncontrollable in Sunday school. Let that inspire you to get more hungry for God. Matthew 5 verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The Bible says the hungry person will be blessed. In Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, I reckon the word blessed is used 9 times in possibly Jesus' very first sermon. But did you know what blessed actually means? It means happiness and contentment that is not affected by negative or adverse circumstances. Wow. Hungry for God, when your contentment and happiness is not affected by the things going on around you, wouldn't that be an incredible place to come to in your life and in mine as well? Happiness. I like to serve a God whose first sermon talks about contentment and happiness. That's the kind of God I want to follow after. And if I'm honest with you today, I am happier today than before I was saved. I'm happier and more content today than I was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. This is true. If you hunger and thirst after God, it is the pathway to the most blessed possible life on planet Earth. Now, as I often say, that doesn't mean there's going to be no trials. That doesn't mean there's going to be no hardships or pain or suffering. Hey, that's part and parcel of life on planet Earth. But the beauty of this verse is in the midst of that. Would you believe in the midst of that, you can still be happy? You can still be content, because contentment and happiness is actually an inside job. It's more to do with what's going on inside you. And the closer you are to God, the more you can be happy and content when circumstances are going against you, which unfortunately is going to happen in life from time to time for all of us. I heard this statement: heaven does not respond so much to need as it does to hunger. When I heard that, I thought, wow, is that really true? Heaven doesn't respond so much to need as to hunger. Well, I can't say categorically that is true, but I think there is a truth in that statement. There was a young man who got saved, and he had a really terrible lifestyle, and he needed victory over that lifestyle, but it doesn't matter what he tried, he couldn't quite get a breakthrough. So what he did is he began to pray a psalm for deliverance 3 times a day. Then he got so hungry for God that he did this for 2 years. 3 times a day. But imagine doing that, reasonably newly saved, 3 times a day, for 2 years. God saw his hunger. And one day, this is a story, he was walking down the street, bingo, all of a sudden, completely set free by God's power. His need for deliverance didn't seem to release heaven, but his hunger for God to do something in his life gave him a wonderful breakthrough. I wonder if there's something you are believing for in your life, wanting, desiring, looking for. You have a need and you're maybe even thinking, God, don't you see my need? Can't you see how hard this is for me? And yet nothing seems to be happening. Maybe, just a suggestion here, why don't you step into or ask God for a greater hunger for a breakthrough? Maybe read a psalm a day, maybe add fasting or whatever it might be. Show God you are really hungry for a breakthrough in your life. And maybe that is what's going to open heaven and do something remarkable in your life. Listen to this verse. A satisfied soul loathes the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. There's a lot of truth packed into that kind of unusual kind of statement, isn't it? But what does that actually mean? I think what it's actually trying to say to us is this, that when we are hungry for God, really hungry for God, even bitter experiences can have a sweetness about them or give us a sweet taste in our mouths. We know that trials make us bitter or better, sweeter or more sour. This is what I believe. When you're really desperately hungry for God, there's something in your heart you just so want to please God. And so as you're going through this bitter experience, there's a cry in your heart. Number one, you're saying, I'm not going to get bitter. I'm not going to get resentful. I'm not going to let unforgiveness get into my heart. And then at the same time, you're saying, God, will you do a work in my life through this bitter experience and make me a better Christian, change my character, or bring me into a closer relationship with you? One of the things I've noticed in following, being in church leadership for decades now, some of the sweetest, kindest, loveliest Christians have actually suffered the most, been through the hardest trials, the most difficult things in life, and somehow, through the bitterness, the bitter thing was made sweet. And they've come out and they're just this amazing, amazing person. The bitter thing is made sweet to the hungry soul. And so when you're going through these really challenging and difficult times in your life, your hunger for God is probably the defining factor. I think we all know too many people, once in church, lovers of God, servants of God, went through a trial, went through a bitter experience. It wasn't made sweet. It was made sour. They've ended up away from God, some of them backslidden completely, some of them bitter and unforgiving. Hunger for God. Maintain it in your life. Never lose that hunger. Because that hunger is that desire to please God no matter what happens in your life. I think we've all got occasions where we could become bitter, offended, and unforgiving. Everyone's going to face it. Somewhere in their life, I've been through stuff where you can become like that. Make a decision. No. The bitter thing has been made sweet. So another thought from Proverbs 27 verse 7 is that everything tastes good. Everything tastes sweet to the hungry soul. So the person who is hungry for God can receive from him in any service because they're hungry for God. So, if the worship, maybe it wasn't that great, but if you really are a worshiper, the worship doesn't have to be great. They don't have to get the right songs. You can just pick up on one part of one song and get into worship. And so be satisfied and be fed even when it's not that great. Or maybe the sermon was just very average and you're thinking, man, this is actually fairly boring. I hope you're not feeling that right now. But if you are, you need to really listen now because I'm going to give you the key of how to get something out of a boring sermon. If you're hungry for God, you will find something to feed off from any sermon, from any preacher, whether the preacher is one of the best on the planet or whether it's just a kid that's sharing a few verses or something that happened in their life, or whether it's a young person. When you're hungry for God, you're going to find food. You're going to find satisfaction in whatever the climate is of the service that you're in or whatever's happening in that service. There's going to be something good for you to capture. So when you're hungry, everything tastes sweet. Now let's think about this for a while. I remember when we were in the Philippines many years ago. We'd been out traveling into the islands and, it's pretty rough. But I remember this time traveling home, Adrian and I were in the bus, and I just had to have something sweet. I do have a bit of a sweet tooth, to be honest, at the best of times. In fact, most nights I have a dessert. It's of some kind. But anyway, so I'm wanting something sweet. So there's some vendors, outside the bus windows, and there's these guys selling these little white things called langsonis. So I thought, well, yeah, they look pretty good. So we bought some langsonis. I ate the first one. I thought, man, this is magic. This is fantastic. So I don't know how many you bought, but I ate virtually all of them. So when we were back in Cebu where we were living, a few days later, I said to Adrian, get me some langsonis. I've got to get some more. She went and brought them home. I put one in my mouth and I thought, how on earth did I ever enjoy that? I didn't even finish them off. When you're hungry, everything tastes great. That was a classic example. So it's the same in the things of God. If you are hungry for God, anytime you pick up your Bible, it can speak to you. Prayer, worship, listening to sermons, it all tastes good and it satisfies with it. That's the power, the tremendous power of hunger for God in our lives. You need never go to another service and walk out thinking that was a waste of time. That should never happen again as you increase your hunger for God. So what do you do if you start to realize, even as you're listening to me today, that you're actually hungry for the wrong things? Your hunger for God's not what it should be, but boy, your hunger for some other things is way beyond what it should be. I can think right now of some things I'm more hungry for than I should be. And I need to try and work on those things and deal with them. And I remember thinking a while ago, God, how do I deal with some of this stuff? I know I'm more hungry for this and this, not terrible things, but it's just more hungry than I should be for it. And how do I deal with that? And then it's like heaven spoke to me, not audibly, and said, kill it. And I thought, like, what? Like, yeah, kill it. In other words, stop feeding it. If you want to kill something, you stop feeding it, And so there's a verse came to mind with that, which is Colossians 3, verse 5. Therefore, put to death your members, which are on earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire. You can make that hunger for things that you shouldn't hunger for. Covetousness, which is idolatry. So, for example, if sport means too much to you, you just watch more sport on TV than you should watch, how are you going to cut that off? How are you going to stop? Just start watching less. I mean, you may stop watching it entirely, but maybe just stop watching it less. Or if you play too much sport and it's consuming all your time, maybe you need to miss a few games or a season or something just to deal with that thing, because you've recognized that it's taking more of your time and attention than is right. And only you can really decide that, but it's hindering you, really walking with God. It's hindering you fulfilling His plan for your life. It's hindering you serving God in His church and the community. It may even be hindering you getting to church. Friend, let me say, it's just not worth it. Kill it, put it to death, or at least severely injure it so it has its rightful place in your life and not beyond that. I have discovered this. Once you stop feeding something, it's amazing how much the desire for that just starts to decrease in a remarkable way, because I've done it in some areas of my life and I've thought, wow, I just decreased that area a bit and the desire dropped away quite significantly. So it's actually not as hard as you might think it is. So kill it, get rid of it. If you spend too much time, here's a big one, young people, old people, everyone listen. If you spend too much time on your computer games, internet, DVDs, movies, Xbox, Fortnite, whatever it is, I know some of you are guilty. I really want to encourage you very strongly, deal with it. Kill it somehow. How do you do that? Just cut it back. just cut it back. Cut it back enough that it actually hurts a bit. You think, oh, maybe when Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me, that meant that some things, in order to follow him, are going to be a little bit painful. They're going to hurt a little bit. Nothing compared to Jesus going on the cross, by the way, if you want to make a comparison. Let it hurt a little bit. Because what's at stake? At stake is your walk with God. At stake is an open heaven over your life, which comes with hunger for God. What's at stake is being blessed by God, which is happiness and contentment regardless of your circumstances. What's at stake is fulfilling your destiny and God's plan for your life. What's at stake is your eternal position in heaven and your rewards, which are determined by how you live your life for God today. There's a lot at stake. So if it hurts, if it's painful, it is worth it. Kill it. There's a principle in life that what you feed grows. For some of us, we've just got to look at our stomach. And we know that what we feed grows. Anything you feed in life is going to grow. So if you feed hunger for God, that's going to grow. Can I encourage you to join with the church, reading through what we're doing at Church Unlimited, reading through the Bible in the course of 1 year. If you do that and manage to get through the whole Bible in a year, I can almost guarantee your hunger for God will increase. And certainly your hunger for the Bible will increase. Other things that you can do, what you feed is going to grow. You know, if you attend prayer meetings, half nights of prayer, join in prayer and fasting, your hunger for God is going to grow. It just cannot not grow. So see some of the simple ways of what you feed is going to grow. So let's wrap this up. Can we start to wrap this up? I just want to give you some practical tips that I have found useful of how to actually increase your own hunger for God. So why don't you listen in, and maybe I've got about 6 tips, I think it is. Maybe 2 or 3 of them you might think, wow, I'm going to grab that. So would you listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit? Stop listening to my voice. Is there something that God's going to give you? Because if you can grab 1 or 2 of these, it's going to change your life forever. So the first one I want to suggest is very simple. Why don't you just ask God? God, will you give me a greater hunger for yourself? James says you have not because you ask not. When was the last time you asked God for a greater hunger for himself? I reckon that is a prayer that he will answer. If you ask God to give you a greater hunger for himself every day for the next 3 months, may not even be that long, I can guarantee you will get a greater hunger for God. And that would be such a great prayer for you to pray. Second thing is empty yourself of things that drain your hunger for God. And I think we know, obviously, if we just do the wrong things, compromise lifestyle, and, you know, just filling ourselves with all this other stuff in life, some of the things we've already mentioned, like magazines or too much sport or things like that, we fill ourselves up with everything else. Our hunger for God is not going to be what it should be. So, think of it this way. How do you get your kids to eat vegetables at dinner time? If you want your kids to eat good food at night, don't let them eat too much junk food or any junk food during the day. Limit those lollies, those burgers, those ice creams, those chips and dips and muesli bars and whatever, all that stuff. And I reckon there's a chance that they'll be more hungry to eat the right food at night. And I know a lot of parents are looking at me and thinking, Pastor, you have got no idea what you're talking about. And you may well be right. But I think you get my point. If you fill up on junk, you're not going to have the hunger for God. So you've got to empty yourself of anything that you think could be limiting your desire for more of God. What you feed increases. So here's another one. Walk with those who are hungry for God. Now, that's probably not too hard to do. Try and find some people that are really passionate for God, hungry for God. I mean, I'm hungry for God, and come to our services, hopefully you can pick up a bit of hunger in your own life, because, you know, who you're connecting with, relating to, really does impact on you in a massive way. So find someone who's hungry, find people who are hungry and hang around them. In contrast, if there are people in your life that are not hungry for God, that are worldly, that are going in the wrong direction, cut it off. Kill it. You might say, but they're the only friends I've got. Yeah, but if your only friends you've got are taking you in the wrong direction and away from God, that's going to affect your eternity. It just isn't worth it. Again, we talked about the cross. Yeah, maybe it is a real cross to take up. Take up your cross daily and follow me. To disband or move away from a friend that's a bad influence, it's a cross, but I want to suggest it probably is worth it. Here's a quote on this one, a couple of quotes I found. If you're not as hungry as I am, we can't eat together. Interesting thought, isn't it? That's from Jeremy McGilvray. Here's another one. Find someone who is as hungry as you are. Because if you walk with those who are hungry for God, your own hunger is going to increase. Here's another one. Number 4, guard what you watch with your eyes. Where did man's problems begin? In the garden, Adam and Eve's eyes. They looked at stuff, they took it when they shouldn't have. It broke their fellowship with God. Man's eyes have been a problem from the very beginning that break fellowship with God, and they're still our problem today. You need to guard what you watch with your eyes, what you watch on TV, on the internet, on social media, movies, whatever it might be. Throw in there pornography, obviously. Just guard what you watch with your eyes. There's a verse on this in Psalm 119, verse 37 says, turn my eyes away from looking at worthless things and revive me in your way. Wow. Turn my eyes away from looking at worthless things and revive me in your way. What we watch has a great impact on our hunger for God. 2 more. Number 5, and that is to encourage you and your family to be in church every Sunday. I believe it's what God wants. I believe it's God's will for us. And we've got to make a decision somewhere along the line that nothing is going to keep us away from getting to church and also getting our family to church, because it's one of the best things you can ever do for your kids. Please, please, get to church every Sunday. Yeah, it's a sacrifice. Yeah, it's taking up your cross maybe. There's other things you want to do, but really it is worth it. And if you do that week in and week out, it will increase your hunger for God. This is how it works. The more you're in church, the more you'll want to be in church. The less you're in church, the less you will want to be in church. So make sure your graph of church attendance is going up and not going down. Because as we know, too many people get to the place where actually they're sick and tired of church and no longer come. And our nation is full of that. But outside of church is going to be very hard to maintain a hunger, a strong hunger for God. The last one I would mention is time in prayer and in the Word on a daily basis. Read your Bible, pray, because when you do those things, they do feed a hunger for God in your life. Hunger is so powerful. Matthew 5 verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Allow God, ask God to increase your hunger and step into a life of contentment and happiness, a life of victory, of greater peace, of greater joy, and of an open heaven that will allow you to see more and more breakthroughs.
Thanks for watching Running with Fire with Bhana from Church Unlimited. Church Unlimited meets in a number of locations across New Zealand and overseas. We would love to have you as our guest.